What's going on, everybody? Cryo here, and that's right, we are back with a real video. Today I wanted to take a look at the Blood Death Knight and how it plays in Shadowlands so far. Full disclosure, this is on the beta servers, so keep in mind things are subject to change once the Shadowlands expansion does go live. But that's not going to stop us from taking a look at some of the new goodies. In this video, I want to talk about some of the new Runeforges, some talents, Legendaries, and the new covenants and how I feel they fit into the Blood playstyle. Friendly reminder, if you're enjoying this content, be sure to leave a big thumbs up, a comment down below, and smash that subscribe button. Now let's get started. Looking at the talents here, you can see we have some new ones, old ones, and some that were reworked. On the level 15 tier, we have Heartbreaker. This talent has excellent synergy with Deathstrike, and we will get into why that matters later on in this video, but this is a solid choice and does not alter your gameplay. Blood Drinker. The fact that this uses a rune is kind of annoying, but this talent is an extraordinarily strong ability with a rather short cooldown. It can be used to start an initial pull, such as a boss, and provide you with ample threat. Keep in mind, while channeling, you can use defensive abilities such as Dancing Rune Weapon, however Dark Command will cancel it. Tombstone. Garbage talent. The general consensus is it needs to be reworked, such as providing 5 stacks of Bone Shield on use instead of consuming them. This would make blood decays much less squishy going into a fight and not require us to ramp up our mitigation. On the level 25 tier, we have Rapid Decomposition. The only thing new with this talent is your Blood Plague now leeches 50% more health. Not a terrible talent, just does not beat out our next choice. Hemostasis, unchanged so far from live, but still a strong choice that also has great synergy with Deathstrike. Consumption. This ability has been buffed by 50% in regards to the healing received by the damage done, but it is now capped at 8 targets. Although the buff is welcomed, it still does not match Hemostasis. On the level 30 tier, we see our first new talent, but first, Foul Bulwark, left unchanged and still very underwhelming. Ossuary, also left unchanged, but remains a staple choice. By now you're probably seeing the pattern revolving around Deathstrike. Relish in Blood, our new talent that looked promising at a glance, however Ossuary still trumps it. If they buff the healing done, or do something drastic like swap this talent with Heartbreaker, I can see maybe making an argument for it later. But for now, it's underwhelming. The level 35 tier brings us Will of the Necropolis. This is the go-to talent in almost every scenario until maybe you outgear the content and no longer spike below 30% as often. Anti-magic barrier was buffed and can be a solid choice if an encounter is extremely magic damage heavy, and you will not be dropping below 30% often. Mark of Blood has been buffed. The heal you receive is 3% of the victim's max HP, up from 2%, but more importantly, the runic power cost has been removed. This is what makes this talent viable. I can see this being used if you are frequently in an off-tank scenario, or in an encounter that has multiple adds that have no threat table. Just throw this on as many targets as you can, and help bring a little bit more utility to your raid. The 40 tier is our utility row, and is more or less left unchanged and dealer's choice. I believe Wraithwalk should be a baseline ability. Given the fact that DKs are not very mobile, this in itself makes kiting mobs a daunting task, thus making players lean more towards Grip of the Dead. Tightening Grasp is awesome if you're in a scenario where you need a lot of ad control and multiple mass grips. Keep in mind, D&D has a much higher uptime than Wraithwalk, but in old content or world content, the extra mobility is a no-brainer. The level 45 tier brings us Voracious. This ability has been buffed, and now alongside the 15% leech you gain for 8 seconds after using Deathstrike, the initial healing is also increased by 20%. I bet you know what I'm going to say next. Synergy. This talent is amazing and turns one of your already strong healing abilities into a super strong healing ability. Death Pact. This talent is nonsense for a Blood Death Knight. Do not take it. Healing absorptions on a blood decay hurts the soul. If you feel the need to take this talent, perhaps it is time to take a look at your defensive usage and active mitigation management. Bloodworms. I'm sure gonna miss these little guys, but I will not be missing the Permanent in combat with inanimate objects until my bloodworms pops. In all seriousness though, this talent is a solid choice as it provides you with some extra DPS. Minimal DPS, but DPS nonetheless, while Voracious only provides you with HPS. On our final tier, Purgatory. If you think you need a cheat death, go for it. This ability will help prevent those random one-shots, but all in all, pretty lackluster. Red Thirst has been buffed. Vampiric Blood's cooldown is now reduced by 1.5 seconds per 10 runic power spent, up from 1 second. This is a big deal since Vampiric Blood itself has also been buffed and is now an even stronger defensive ability. And considering how often we're talking about Deathstrike, you will be spending a lot of runic power fairly often, so being able to use Vamp Blood multiple times during an encounter can be huge, especially when paired with a certain legendary item that we will talk about later. And finally, Bone Storm. Take this talent whenever you are not in danger of random one-shots and need Purgatory, and also when you do not require more frequent uses of Vamp Blood. Finally, Runeforging is getting some love and we're not just looking at Razor Ice or Fallen Crusader or... Nope, that's it. But anyways, starting off we have the Rune of Hysteria. Definitely was not designed for Blood Death Knights, but may see some playing time. This affix plus Ossuary talent will increase your runic power pool up to 145. What this means for us is that we will have the ability to get 3 death strikes off, weave in an ability or 2, and then get a 4th. Definitely a strong contender. Rune of Razor Ice. You will not be using this as blood. Move along. Rune of Sanguination. This affix is huge. This essentially turns your death strike into an execute-like ability. Increasing the damage it does, the less health your target has. More importantly, a pseudo-cheat death is built into it. When you dip below 35% HP, you will receive a hot that ticks for 8 seconds and heals you for 48% of your maximum HP. This does have a cooldown of 5 minutes, but it does not have the negative effect of absorbing heals like Purgatory. This is another piece to our Death Strike synergy puzzle. Moving on, Rune of Spell Warding reminds us that Null Barrier may be gone, but it is not forgotten. This rune could see some playtime on particularly heavy magic damage encounters. Pair this with the anti-magic barrier talent, and spell damage is no longer a threat. Affixes like these are an excellent reminder to players to make good use of your Deathgate, swap Runeforges, and Deathgate back type scenarios. However, you probably won't see this rune too often in the Mythic Plus scene. Rune of Apocalypse. Meh. Rune of the Fallen Crusader, good old faithful, a solid overall DPS choice. Rune of the Stoneskin Gargoyle. I feel this affix gets a bad rap as it's just really underwhelming and can't compete with the others. Rune of Unending Thirst. Seems like a pretty solid choice at first glance. Flat 10% haste increase is always nice. And if the kill proc works in Mythic Plus, maybe you'll see it as like added mobility, but there are far better choices. So it is not yet speculated on how long it will take to actually make legendaries, but I can say I already enjoy not having to rely on RNG. So far the system looks pretty cool, being able to not only select which legendary power you want, but also having a choice of which slot to place it in and which secondary stats to adhere to it. Now it does look like each legendary power has 2 equipment slots available, and that is still far more flexible and much easier to work around. As you can see, there are some generic powers and some legendary powers that are specific to your class specialization. The first generic Death Knight power is Super Strain. Essentially, you gain all of the Death Knight specialization's specific dots. Currently, this is overtuned, but it's pretty nice in terms of damage output and threat generation. I could see you using this in solo content, the Tower of Torghast, Mythic Pluses if they don't tune the damage. All in all, a very strong legendary. Pheromones. See what they did there? Now, I don't know if you remember the talent Tremble Before Me in Legion, but it was very strong to have in the Mythic Plus scene. Death and Decay's ability to randomly fear all targets inside at different times can come in clutch in terms of interrupts. Now, Tremble Before Me did have an internal cooldown of 10 seconds on the fear component. However, the tooltip as it stands for Pheromones does not mention anything about it. More testing will have to be done, but if this has no internal cooldown, this legendary will be extremely useful in Mythic Plus. Death's Embrace. Being able to swap this on during encounters with heavy magic damage will be super beneficial, but depending on how long it takes to acquire legendaries, this probably won't be my first choice. Grip of the Everlasting. Not too many times have I needed to Death Grip and then Death Grip again within 3 seconds. I can see this being useful in arenas against mobile classes, but that's about it. Now on for the blood-specific legendary powers. First up here we have Brindor's Might, a self-reliance legendary that was very strong in Legion and remains strong in Shadowlands. The ability to save runic power wherever you can is invaluable to a Blood Death Knight, a strong contender for being the first crafted legendary. Crimson Rune Weapon. There is a typo on the tooltip, and it's 3 seconds, not 30. If every time you got a bone shield removed and the cooldown of Dancing Rune Weapon was reduced by 30 seconds, this would absolutely 100% be an S tier legendary and mandatory, as Dancing Rune Weapon would pretty much be up permanently. Gorfien's Domination. This legendary power can be a very solid choice. As stated earlier, Vampiric Blood is an extraordinarily strong cooldown, and while taking Red Mist already reduces its cooldown, pairing it with this legendary power makes it even stronger. Solid contender for self-reliance. Lastly, we have Vampiric Aura. Now this legendary seems very strong, especially when considering a lot of Shadowlands dungeons have a massive party-wide AoE. Being able to increase everyone's health received and maximum health by 15% is pretty huge. This will make Vampiric Blood require a bit more brain power to use, but not too much. You may need to coordinate with your healer and or have a solid understanding of the content you are doing to know when you will get the maximum use of its effect. This is no longer a personal cooldown, and you might have to save it for your friends. First on deck, we have the Necrolords. Hands down, this covenant has the greatest visual effects and the most fun ability. Let's talk about the Abomination's Limb first. This is a class-specific ability you gain should you choose to align with the Necrolords. This ability causes you to sprout an additional limb for 12 seconds. Every 1 second, it deals X amount of shadow damage to all nearby enemies, and pulls an enemy to your location if they are further than 8 yards away from you. This is an instant cast ability, it has no resource cost, a 20-yard range, and a 2-minute cooldown. The fact that this does not cost you any runes or runic power is huge. This ability will not affect your rotation other than adding an additional button to press. Now while this ability is definitely useful to Blood Death Knights, it is not without its faults. The only major hindrance I have encountered with this ability is having the Death Grip component trigger when you don't want it to. A perfect example is in the dungeon Plaguefall. There are several adds that you need as a tank to stay away from, but also adds that need to be kept away from other adds. This means that you cannot press this button, and thus you miss out on DPS. The main ability you gain from the Necrolords is Fleshcraft. This ability forms a shield of flesh and bone over 4 seconds that prevents damage equal to 20% of your maximum health. Now if you channel near a corpse, you will claim their essence and grow the shield up to 50% of your maximum health. This shield can become fairly strong when paired with certain soulbinds and conduits, but at its base is pretty lackluster. It will definitely be a fun button to press in solo and world content, but stopping in a Mythic Plus to channel for 4 seconds for a shield that will break only after a few melees hardly seems worth it. The Night Fae, another very visually appealing covenant, and the one that I myself am leaning more towards. The class-specific ability you receive when aligning with the Night Fae is Death's Due. This ability replaces Death and Decay entirely, and it corrupts the ground, causing X amount of shadow damage over 10 seconds to targets that remain within the area. Enemies deal 1% reduced damage to you, up to a maximum of 15%, and their power is transferred to you as an equal amount of strength. This ability stacks and is incredibly strong defensively and offensively. While standing in your Death's Due, your Heartstrike will still hit up to 3 targets, so fret not about your ability to cleave. The signature ability you gain from joining the Night Fae is Soul Shape. Using this ability turns your player into a Vulpin, increasing movement speed by 30%. You can reactivate Soul Shape to teleport 10 yards forward. This lasts for 12 seconds or indefinitely while you're in a rest area. It is an instant cast with a 1.5 minute cooldown. The greatest aspect of this ability is the fact that you can still use all of your other abilities. Since Death Knights are notoriously slow, having the ability to teleport around while blood boiling is amazing. This also helps while kiting difficult mobs. Fun facts about the soul shape: there will be additional cosmetic forms that can be earned and collected through a variety of gameplay. This means you don't just have to be a sexy fox, you could be a moth, a unicorn, terraclaw, crane, lion, tiger, hyena, cobra, dragon turtle, stag, owlcat, and this is just a few. It's actually kind of insane. The Venthyr, the one covenant you would assume Blood DKs flock to. This covenant is considered to be a solid choice as of now for Blood DKs, as the class-specific ability can be quite strong. Swarming Mist. A heavy mist surrounds you for 8 seconds, increasing your chance to dodge by 10%. It also deals shadow damage every 1 second to enemies within 10 yards. Every time it deals damage, you gain 3 runic power up to a maximum amount of 15 runic power. This ability costs 1 rune, is an instant cast with a 1-minute cooldown. This ability reminds me of having a weaker version of Bone Storm that grants you runic power instead of healing you. Swarming Mist does cap out at 5 targets in terms of the runic power gain, but can net you a huge amount in a short amount of time. I can see this being a very strong contender. Moving on, the Venthyr's signature ability is Door of Shadows. Simply wend through the shadows appearing at the targeted location. This ability has a 35-yard range, a 1.5 second cast, and at its base form, 1 charge with a 1-minute recharge. The fact that this is not an instant cast ability without a specific anima power kinda bums out a tank spec. Standing still, not mitigating for 1.5 seconds could mean life or death. It also does not have the same pathing as, say, Demonic Leap, so finding quote-unquote exploits with it will be kinda tough. A flavorful ability nonetheless to use out in the world, however I don't see a Blood DK using it too often elsewhere. The Kyrian. What's this little guy do? Brings me some snacks, it's kinda cool. Does he do anything else? Nope. But in all seriousness, the Kyrian could be a potential choice. The class-specific ability you gain is Shackle the Unworthy. Admonish your target for their past transgressions, reducing the damage they deal to you by 5% and dealing X amount of arcane damage over 14 seconds. While Shackle the Unworthy is active on an enemy, rune-spending attacks reduce its cooldown by 4 seconds. This is a fairly strong ability when talking single target, but loses value in an AoE scenario. However, you can place this on the most threatening mob and forget about it. The more important aspect that appeals to Blood is the fact that this ability has no cost, a 30-yard range, and is instant. This will shine on boss fights both defensively and offensively. The signature Covenant ability of the Kyrian is Summon Steward. Call your steward to bring you a Phial of Serenity that can be consumed to restore 15% of your health and remove all curses, disease, poison, and bleed effects. Your steward additionally offers you access to a selection of useful amenities, each once per day. The ability is an instant cast, can be used while in combat, lasts for 3 minutes, and has a 5-minute cooldown. The main appeal of this ability is the Curse, Disease, Poison, and Bleed effect potion that, oh yeah, also heals you. Think of a souped up health stone. This will be very useful in dungeons and raids to further bolster your self-reliance. The other additional amenities, such as being able to change your talents, is a nice quality of life boost, but that's about it. Well, there you have it, folks. The Blood Death Knight, all things considered, I feel it's in a pretty solid state. It's looking very strong in terms of self-reliance, as always. Class synergy with the new game aspects, nothing feels too clunky or out of place. And in terms of threat generation, which may become a thing again come Shadowlands. Now you probably noticed I did not go over the soul binding and conduit system. These will be in part 2. It's a pretty hefty topic and I didn't want this video to run too long, so be on the lookout for that. Thanks for stopping by and watching, and as always, stay frosty.